Hi, I'm Ems, aka Undack and Wings, and I like to take an interest in politics and current events, and it's very interesting at the moment with English politics, which has been entertaining. And no, I'm not talking about Andy Burnham, one of my local MPs, winning in a landslide and then becoming Prime Minister. No, I'm talking about the influential Count BinFace. So I wanted to do a tribute to Count BinFace with his upcoming by-election in Clacton. So let's make a Wardolly vignette for him. So I have a miniature of BinFace. This is from Troublemaker Games. I'll put the link in the description below where you can snag one of these. Some of the proceeds as well go to the NHS, which is great. This is cast in metal and it's really high quality and crisp and clean. It makes a change having some metal models. I kind of miss painting them. So obviously, like I said, it's going to be like a vignette diorama style. I'm going to make it kind of similar to this Fallout one that I've done previously. Vignettes are awesome and they're like a smaller version of a diorama, and I highly recommend you try and make one for your own Wardollies. So for the plinth, I just have a block of wood. So you can get these in packs online or in art stores, or you can even just make them yourself or get some leftover pieces from like a hardware store. Skipping ahead here, this is the back portion of the plinth, and I've used for the main structure this pink foam stuff. It's called Brett Martin foam. It's like a hard kind of like compressed material, and it's really solid to work with, but you could just use some XPS foam, so corkboard, a piece of wood, whatever else similar if you wanted to make something like this. And then the brick sheets, these are textured plastic sheets, plasticard, and you can get these in different styles as well from different manufacturers, and these are really handy if you want to make some terrain or some dioramas and such forth. For the base, I'm keeping it super simple again. I've just got some asphalt texture paste. If you want to make something similar on the cheap, just mix some glue and sand together in a bit of paint. So here it is stuck onto the base. And I've just primed the whole thing. And then I've grabbed two paints for making it interactive. So we've got Hull Red and Wine Red. And I'm going to dry brush this on. And whilst I'm doing this, I'm going to have a little chat about who Count BinFace is. So BinFace is actually a guy called Jonathan David Harvey. He's a comedian and a political satirical writer. He's worked on quite a lot of famous shows in the UK, such as The Thick of It and Have I Got News for You. BinFace has been standing in different local elections in England for the past decade. He started off as a character called Lord Buckethead. However, there was a bit of an issue with that, as it was a character which had been created in the 80s. Someone else stood as him in elections back then. And the character comes from a sci-fi parody of Star Wars called Hyperdrive. The movie is also called Gremloids from 1984 if you want to check it out. Moving on with the diorama now, I'm adding some white to the recesses of this. This is quite time consuming, so I'm not going to show the entire process. Count BinFace isn't necessarily an anomaly in British politics. There have been a number of parody and satirical parties over the years, most notably the Monster Raving Loony Party. The Raving Loony Party has been around since the 80s and started off with a guy called Screaming Lord Sutch, who's a comedian and musician. The party is still going to this day, and they've won several council seats in the past. There have been numerous independent candidates and political parties over the years, which are parody ones are just outrageous. My favourite being the Dungeons, Death and Taxes party, which is now defunct. Moving back onto the task at hand. So I'm going to add some variation to the bricks. Obviously, bricks in real life have different variations in the colours, from weathering and the stone, etc. So I just grabbed a bunch of different like orangey, red kind of tones and a bit of grey as well. And I'm just going over some of the individual bricks. So obviously on the surface, these kind of frivolous parody kind of parties do seem a bit silly and kind of make a mockery of democracy. However, on the other hand, it kind of shows you that kind of anyone can go into politics if they wanted to, especially on like a local level, or like councillor seats or an NPC in like a small town. And despite it seeming silly as well, I do think it brings more attention to politics and gets people more interested, especially lately when people feel a bit disenfranchised by governments. And it's funny, obviously, with the Clacton election, it's kind of given a lot of press to it. So I wanted to add a bit more character to the backdrop, so I printed out some posters. And I highly recommend you try and do this with some terrain or some dioramas. It just adds a lot more character to your visuals. I printed out a Hope poster, which is quite an infamous one, but with BinFace on it, and we have Reform as well. And here's the poster stuck on. I added a little bit of embellishment on the bottom one. I wanted to add to the absurdity and humour of this diorama in honour of BinFace, so I've made him a little opponent. It's a toad which I've 3D printed. I've put a flat cap on it I've made with clay. It's got a cigarette, and I've also made a glass. The pint glass is made from the protective covering you get with brushes. And any resemblance to actual politicians who look like toads, this is all covered under parody law, I hope. Joking aside, let's move on to the man, or the spaceman, the myth, the legend that is Count BinFace. So keeping it really simple, I've got some plate mail metal here from the Army Painter. Any silver will do. I don't get the whole hubbub of like specific paint brands. Paint whatever you like painting with. So this is just going over his bucket helmet and everywhere else where I think the silver would go. Obviously, have a look at some pictures of Count BinFace. You know, get some references. It's easy enough. Just Google him. And yes, we do call them bins here in the UK. I know you call them trash cans. We sometimes call them rubbish bins, but yeah, it's a bin. And as I like to say about people I don't like, get in the bin. And with British politics and humour, you can kind of see where it's influenced things like Judge Dredd and even early Warhammer 40k, with the satirical side of like serious topics being explored with absurd characters and over-the-top concepts. And even people like Terry Pratchett as well. People resonate with satire and allegory more than real-world issues. It's easier to get concepts across to people when they're not completely media illiterate. Anyway, I've just painted all the silver bits, and yeah, this is quite a nice silver, to be honest. It does stand out. Moving on, I've got some really exciting basalt grey from AK here. Considering this is such a cool miniature, it has quite a muted, simple paint scheme, which isn't a complete turn-off. It means you can paint it up really quickly if you get one of these, or you can go a bit more like fancy with it if you want to get more complicated with painting silvers and like blacks and greys if you wanted to. Speaking of parody laws and Judge Dredd, there was a Judge Dredd comic called The Cursed Earth, which was banned for many years. I'm just moving on and adding some Thunderhawk blue type of colour here. So it's like a grey-blue colour. And this is one of my favourite colours to add to like blacks and greys. And this is going over his cape just for a pop of a different colour. Anyway, segueing back to Judge Dredd and The Cursed Earth. It was banned for many years because it had loads of pop culture characters in it. And McDonald's characters and Burger King and things like that. So obviously it got banned because of copyrights, but then new parody laws came in like over a decade ago, which protected it under satire. So we're just going to get some black wash all over this into the recesses. Got some lovely recesses to get this into to add some shadows to it. So here's my BinFace finished. So that was just like a basic paint job which I showed you, but if you want to add some more pops of colour, I love this silver from Darkstar Molten Metals, but you can just get any like really bright silver to add some highlights to, and make sure you add a bit more like black paint into the recesses to create some contrast. And as I said before, like a Thunderhawk blue, you know, like a blue, green or grey works really well, and like a muted pale blue to add some final highlights. The thing with black painting it is you don't have to use like greys all the time. You can add other colours to it as well. And here's my finished BinFace diorama. I had so much fun making this, and I've been a bit of a hobby slump lately, so this was a nice kick up the backside. Although I love the BinFace miniature, it's really well made. I do love the political toad which I've made. I also 3D printed a bin bag in the background with a $sign on it. I know I could put a pound sign, but the $sign's more universal. And for obvious reasons, it being a $sign, I'm not going to say the obvious, but you probably know why. £5 million worth of why. I just got some cotton wool to add for the cigarette effect, and I use that on the pint glass as well for like the foam at the top. So if you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the process. I had so much fun making this, and I hope it inspires you to get your own BinFace miniature or make your own little dioramas. And you got a bit of a tidbit of British politics and who Count BinFace is on the surface, as well as some of my own rantings. And you've had an insight into where some of my humour does come from. As always, thank you for watching. All my links to my social media will be in the description below. I do post a lot on Instagram. Remember to enjoy your hobbies for yourself. And at the end of the day, they're just Wardollies, and this is all just satire and parody. I hope to see you in the next one. Remember to vote or get involved in grassroots movements, because politics is everywhere and in everything.